What is going on, everyone? This is Cody here with Drew Code Sports Talk, where we talk about life, sports, and everything in between. Thank you guys so much for joining me right now. I am a little late on this episode, but that's okay. Life happens and it's all good. If you guys haven't already done so, do me a favor. Go ahead and subscribe to the YouTube channel and go ahead and follow us on where all the podcast channels where you can find us: iHeart, Apple, Spotify, Google Podcasts, wherever you listen to your podcast, we're available on. So go check us out there. Also, do me a favor too, go follow us on social media: Instagram, TikTok, Twitter, or X, whatever it's called now, Threads, Facebook. We're all there. So appreciate it if you guys did all that for me. And man, I don't know about you guys, but it's been a quiet week in sports. Yeah, I say that tongue in cheek. I mean, if you're a Raiders fan, it's a bit rough. We can't even enjoy a victory without some sort of drama, which is okay. I guess it's par for the course. And, I think some out there would say that they saw this coming. I know I can speak for myself when I say that, I think I mentioned that last year I wouldn't be surprised if something like this happened because we were performing poorly. And I wouldn't say we're performing poorly, but we're definitely underperforming what our expectations were. And, as everyone knows, Davante Adams has requested a trade out of Las Vegas, and we'll definitely get into that. And I also got plenty of other topics about the NFL, injuries, and all that other good stuff. So we're going to dive right into it. And of course, as I was leading off, we're talking about Davante Adams. He requested on Tuesday a trade from the Las Vegas Raiders, and it's been reported that his preferred destination is New Orleans Saints, who Drew kind of pointed out. He had a video that we put out a couple of days ago. One, there was a full video where he was driving and he gave his raw, authentic reaction to it. And then there was another one that we posted that was more of a cut down version of it. But the Saints are at the top of that list. Obviously, the New York Jets are at the top of that list with Davante's connection with Aaron Rodgers. A couple of other teams that I threw out there was like the Buffalo Bills, Pittsburgh Steelers, Baltimore Ravens obviously come to mind. San Francisco 49ers, I wouldn't be surprised. I've heard their name thrown out there, and that was something I texted Drew about. And I think the 49ers are probably in play. I imagine that the Raiders will make this decision whenever it suits their timetable. I mean, I have a lot of opinions about how I feel like everything is kind of playing out and how it's kind of gone so far. And so for the most part, though, I mean, kind of saw this coming. It's just, I guess what's heartbreaking about it is it's coming to reality. And, all the off season talk about, I've always wanted to be a Raider, and Davante Adams, which basically was saying that consistently. And, now him formally requesting a trade. And I think what's also frustrating too is, obviously some Raider Nation fans are basically saying, he's quitting on the team. And then there's other Raider fans that are kind of blaming the team, I would say, or at least the Raiders organization, for letting Adams kind of feel the way he does. Look, I hate when a player in the middle of the season quits on a team. I don't like it, but I will say too, for Davante Adams, I get it. We traded for him so that way he can play with his best friend in a new regime. It didn't go great the first season. And then in the second season, we thought that we'd make it up to him by signing Jimmy Garroppolo, which wasn't any better. And then he had to play with, Brian Hoyer. He had to play with Aiden O'Connell. And then now we said, we're definitely going to address it. And we go with Gardner Minshew. And no disrespect to Gardner Minshew. He's in the top 10, I think, in completion percentage, and I think in yardage or something of that nature. But, for the standard that Davante Adams is used to in terms of winning, the Raiders weren't winning. And, I'm sure with AP's comments earlier this week, that kind of made it seem like that it had fallen apart really quickly. If any of the reports are true from what I was seeing from like Adam Scheffler and Ian Rappaport or any of the other kind of insiders, basically this was kind of in the makings for about a year. From what they're saying is his camp, Davante Adams' camp, kind of threw this out there with, kind of mentioning it, a change of scenery would probably be a good thing. The Raiders didn't do so. And then at the same time, what made it confusing is Davante Adams on his side. Obviously, he was saying, I don't want to go anywhere. I'm going to play for this team, which I think is great. I don't blame him, though, for wanting to leave to win. And I thought in the offseason that the Raiders might do this as a solid to him, to where he has an opportunity to win a championship since we're not going anywhere. And also, too, he has a pretty hefty contract and we can get some assets from it. But I didn't think that it would sour to this, to where it's like a relationship breakup in a sense. And, I would be lying if I said I wasn't a little upset. Like, I wish Davante Adams wouldn't have done this right now. We did come off of a victory. We maybe could build off of it. I'm not saying that we have playoff aspirations, but at least we can be competitive. But, at the same time, the NFL is a business, unfortunately. And, he's a competitor. He wants to win. And I get it. So I do have some teams, as I had mentioned. We talked about the Saints, talked about the Bills, talked about the Jets, the Ravens, the Steelers, the 49ers. I think, if I'm being honest, the Saints, I was just hearing, don't have the cap space to really make the deal happen, according to Jordan Schultz on Colin Cowherd's show this morning. So I'm just going to say that the Saints is probably the one that the Raiders would like to do the most, only because they probably have the capital for it. Probably a team that obviously is not within the conference. So that would be, I think the Raiders would prefer to not trade within the AFC, definitely not within the division, which they won't do. And also, too, like an NFC team that's probably best for them as well. So I think that's what they're targeting right there. And then, the New York Jets, I think, are probably going to be the one that pays a king's ransom for Davante Adams, if I'm being honest, because, a lot of people were saying out there that, Davante Adams is going to be a Jet. It's just a matter of time. Unfortunately, it looks like that they're correct, or at least on the surface of it. But who knows? Because just like what Drew had mentioned, in his video, I don't know if Davante Adams wants to go from one dysfunctional organization to another. And if I had to give my opinion, I think the Raiders are, in terms of like dysfunctionality, I don't think the Raiders are nearly as bad as the Jets. I think it's completely obvious with the Jets head coach situation with Robert Saleh and Aaron Rodgers that they do not like each other. I know that they're trying to put on a face in the public, and, Aaron Rodgers is trying to play it down. I'm calling BS on that. I completely think that, neither one of them like each other. They're kind of just doing it for the team, but I don't think Robert Saleh has a pulse on that locker room. And to be truthful, too, we don't know if behind the scenes, Aaron Rodgers is kind of telling Davante Adams, hey, man, don't come, or at least wait one season, or whatever the case may be. Because if I'm the Raiders and I'm thinking about trading Davante Adams, I may want Garrett Wilson in that trade as well. And I don't know if the Jets are crazy enough to do it for potentially a 1 year, maybe a longer term rental. Who knows? So we'll see with that. But I think the Jets are probably the ones that's going to pay the most if we had an asking price, just because I think with the media pressure, and let's hypothetically say that Aaron Rodgers is wanting Davante Adams on the team, which he probably is. Me saying that he doesn't want him to join this dysfunctional organization is probably nothing. It's probably just me assuming that Aaron Rodgers is trying to do his guy a solid and not join him in, in New York. But, if Davante Adams does go there, I can imagine that the Jets are going to have a lot of pressure to pull that trigger to get a deal done to where Davante Adams does join Aaron Rodgers. And also, too, you're going to want to make Aaron Rodgers happy, because there's an opportunity, and I think it's a real possibility, that this whole Jets team is going to rebuild if they don't do anything. And especially if ownership doesn't meet the demands of Aaron Rodgers or whatever the case may be. So I think if there's ever a time to make a decision to hopefully save face and be competitive, it'd probably be now. I think a team that would probably benefit Davante the most would probably be like the Baltimore Ravens. I mean, they would be absolutely scary. I think they have the cap space for it. The Baltimore Ravens, did they handle the Bills handedly? Yes, they did. But one of the things that you can see too is they're not passing the ball like 30, 40 times like, normal NFL teams. They're definitely running the ball a lot, which is great. And they're definitely relying on Derek Henry, Justice Hill. Lamar Jackson is still seeing some rush opportunities, but obviously a lot less, just because you want to preserve him and not get him injured. But one of the things that this Ravens team doesn't really have is they don't really have an alpha receiver. And Zay Flowers, I think, is a good receiver for Lamar for like a quick route, or, if you want to run a go route and you want to send him out there, I think that's fine. Do I think that you can put him on the outside and be challenged with the best cornerback? Probably not. And I think this is where Davante Adams, if he were to step into that Ravens offense, I think the production for him would go down, if I'm being honest, for Davante Adams. I don't think he would be seeing 15 targets or whatnot. But I think ultimately, if he wants to win, that would be the best opportunity for him to go to, because they're already a great team. They have a very good defense. They have a really good offense with a running back that's leading the league right now in rushing. They are 2-2 right now. They lost, ironically, to the Raiders, and they also lost to the defending Super Bowl champions on week 1. So definitely not a great start, but starting to pick up steam. Really steamrolled through the Cowboys, beat up on the Bills. And now if they can add a playmaker like Davante Adams, I think that just makes them that more dangerous. And I would say that they are probably the AFC threat. I know, the Chiefs are still in there, but they're getting decimated with injuries right now. And yes, they're winning. Some would say because of the refs, and maybe that's true, but also, again, I was mentioning this in my bold predictions that, complacency, in my opinion, is a real thing. They're trying to three-peat, which has never been done before. And their number one receiver, referring to the Chiefs, just got injured, and they really don't have anybody. So, and I'll get back to the Chiefs in a minute. But my point being is, with the Baltimore Ravens, is they could rely on Davante Adams to be that guy to beat a DB off the line, to find open space, be able to read coverages just like Lamar does. And I think this clearly would be the best receiver Lamar Jackson would have ever been on the same team with. And I think this would propel the Ravens into a realm of dominance that it would be quite scary. And even if you were going to rent Davante Adams for one season, I think for the Ravens, it's definitely worth it. Because Lamar Jackson has a lot of questions on him himself. He came off of an MVP season, but yet lost into the playoffs. And you get him a guy like this, and now it's like, okay, you have everything you need now. What are you going to do? So I definitely think the Ravens are in a huge play, especially if the Jets don't really pull the trigger, or, they don't pay enough. Who knows? Also, in a scenario, the Raiders could, out of spite to not wanting to send Davante Adams to his best friend, or not his best friend, to his former teammate Aaron Rodgers, as a form of punishment. And I say that in air quotes because it's probably not really punishment, send him to Baltimore. More likely, though, the punishment would be sending him to, like, New England Patriots or Cleveland Browns. Probably would be a bigger punishment. But, regardless, though, so I definitely think the Baltimore Ravens would be the perfect spot for Davante. Also, the Pittsburgh Steelers, they do have George Pickens. They don't really have a second guy that I can think of off the top of my head. It's really just like a band of collection of receivers. You put in Davante Adams in there. Clearly, he's the number one. George Pickens can be the number two guy. And for Justin Fields, who is showing flashes of huge improvements and comfortability, getting a lot of confidence in this Steelers offense with Arthur Smith, that would be huge for Justin Fields as well, especially a receiver at the pedigree of Davante Adams. That would be absolutely hands down a really good spot for Davante and for the Steelers as well. I think either one of those two AFC North teams getting Davante Adams could be the difference maker between making them, a wild card contender to an AFC threat for sure. And I did mention too, the San Francisco 49ers. That was a team that I was thinking that would probably be willing to use draft capital, maybe even put a player in there. Which player, I don't know. If I was really thinking about it, probably be a defensive player that AP would want. But if Davante Adams went to the Niners as well, the Niners could really use a player like Davante Adams, especially with having Deebo Samuel, Brandon Ayuk, Juwan Jennings. They have a plethora of players currently. But you add Davante Adams, who doesn't really need to be the number one guy, but can step in there, especially when it comes to weeks of Deebo maybe being out. Brandon Ayuk still hasn't really showed up since he got paid. Juwan Jennings is basically carrying the receiving responsibility. You have George Kittle, I mean, I would hate that as well because it's the Niners, and nothing is worse than when the Niner fans in this town have something to root for. Right now, they're still saying that they're good, but the record is showing them as like a 500 team. So, the Niners are definitely in play here. The Buffalo Bills, I think, would make a lot of sense for Davante as well. And these are primarily AFC teams that that would be basically take him to the next level. And, the Bills may not do it just because they just got out of a situation with Stephon Diggs. But Davante Adams doesn't strike me as somebody that would hold a team hostage or give an attitude in that sense. At least I didn't suspect it for the Raiders. That's why I think Davante requesting a trade and how quickly things soured just seems such a surprise, because it's not like it built up like it did with Stephon Diggs and the Buffalo Bills. But I think Davante going to the Bills would definitely elevate that offense, and it would give them a true number one guy with those young receivers. And I'm sure they want to remain young, but having a veteran receiver there, especially a go-to guy, I think would make a huge difference as well. And for Josh Allen, that would be tremendous. So I think that's an option as well. Davante Adams definitely has talent. And in my opinion, he's still top 2, top 3 receiver in the league. And I know him being on the Raiders, for some analysts, really notched down like the quality of a receiver he is. But there's absolutely no doubt when he got traded to the Raiders, he was arguably the number 1 receiver in the league. And I would even argue, I still think he is. He hasn't proven that he's not. Discounting him because of the team he's on doesn't mean that he, the player, is lesser than, in my opinion. Like, yes, you have Justin Jefferson, Jamar Chase. Now you have Malik Neighbors, who is coming onto the scene. Yeah, you have all these fantastic receivers, but still there's absolutely no doubt that Davante Adams is still, arguably the number 1 receiver just with his skill set. But any team that gets him is definitely going to be heading in the right direction, potentially a contender. And we'll see what the Raiders get. Like, this is the question that I think is hard, is what are the Raiders going to do? Are they going to do a solid by Davante Adams, who maybe they feel like that they are, being blindsided by, or are they just going to do what's best for the Raiders? If I had to give a hunch, I'd say they're going to do what's best for themselves, and they're going to trade him to wherever. Like, don't be surprised if, and I'm just throwing a team out there, I have no idea if this is going to happen. Don't be surprised if the Rams get into play. Don't be surprised if the Eagles get into play, which I don't think so, but maybe. The Commanders, maybe. That would be an interesting one. Just some teams to throw out there. I don't know if there's any truth behind it. I think solely it's to the Jets or the Saints. I definitely think that the Ravens are in play for sure. But I mean, who knows? I think after this week, we're going to see what teams, out of the teams that I've named, we're going to see which ones are really looking to bring on Davante Adams to, hopefully win a championship. And don't be surprised if maybe the Detroit Lions get involved. I mean, yes, they have Amon-Ra St. Brown, but, they have Jamison Williams, who, is a good receiver. It's got some flash to him, but put in Davante Adams there to be like that legit outside receiver. And who knows what this offense can look like. And it's already good enough now. And I can't imagine that Detroit doesn't want to bolster talent as well. So just a bunch of teams to throw out there to just say like where Davante might go. And for those that have been saying, I've been hearing the Los Angeles Chargers, I've been hearing Kansas City Chiefs. I think RG3 or whoever else has been saying that Kansas City Chiefs need to do everything they can to get Davante Adams. I'm going to just say this right now, and I think everyone in Raider Nation, I'm going to say everybody in Raider Nation will say there'll be a cold day in hell before Davante Adams gets traded to a divisional rival, especially the Chiefs. The only way the Chiefs are getting Davante Adams is by some happenstance. The Raiders trade away Davante Adams to a team that is going to release him or waive him for whatever the reason is, and then he gets picked up or he gets signed as a free agent outright to Kansas City. That is the absolutely only way that happens. But I have a hunch, though, a team that is going to pay resources, draft capital to get Davante Adams is not just going to waive him or release him. And also, too, I'm just going to play this out there. I don't think Davante Adams, who grew up as a Raider fan, just played the last two and a third seasons with the Raiders, is going to want to go to a division rival. I think that he's still a Raider fan at heart in some respects, to where he's not going to want to go to the Chiefs. He's hated the Chiefs the last, again, almost 3 full seasons. I doubt that he's going to want to go there and I don't want to say do a KD thing when he joined the Warriors as like a negative, but like I don't think he wants to join the Chiefs just because he, you can't beat him, you join him kind of a thing. So that's what I would assume. But just a couple of stats I would just want to throw out there too regarding Davante Adams, which is why I don't blame Davante Adams for asking for a change of scenery or a trade request, because of the sourness that happened since his time with Las Vegas. Because remember, he got traded shortly after Josh McDaniels and Dave Ziegler took over operations and coaching for the Raiders. Then they made that trade to get Davante Adams and paired him with his college quarterback, Derek Carr, which both Fresno State Bulldogs, which here in the Valley we absolutely loved when they played together. So, of course, they look great together. And here's some stats. So in 2022, this is the first full season, of course, with the Raiders. Davante Adams played 17 games. He had 100 receptions off of 180 targets, 1,516 yards with 14 touchdowns. That was with Derek Carr, and 2 games with Jarrett Stidham, which we've on this page and on our show, we've talked about religiously how we thought as Raider fans, or at least for our team, how it was a bad idea to just get rid of Derek Carr. 100%, like he had 9 years to figure it out, but he never had a legit defense. And, we only get 1 season with him and Davante Adams, and it was a productive season. But let's not forget, too, the coach that he had in Josh McDaniels, not a great coach. And that was playing out in front of us as the season wore on in 2022. So in 2023, when that season started, we don't have Derek Carr. We let him go. We let him walk for nothing. We didn't even trade him. And we signed Jimmy Garroppolo, who was coming off an injury of his own. And we signed him. He plays 7 games. And then Aiden O'Connell takes over the rest of 2023 with 11 games left. Now, granted, there was a start in between, and then he started the remaining, I think it was 7 games of the season following Josh McDaniels and Dave Ziegler getting released. And Davante Adams still caught 103 passes off of 175 targets, 1,144 yards, and still had 8 touchdown receptions, which was still pretty productive. Very good. And then this season, out of 3 games, he's had 18 receptions off of 27 targets, 209 yards with 1 touchdown reception. That was from the 3 games that Gardner Minshew has played right now. Week 4, of course, he was out with a hamstring injury, and he remains out for week 5 with a hamstring injury. So for the most part, like, we have Derek Carr, Jimmy Garoppolo, Brian Hoyer, Aiden O'Connell, Gardner Minshew. We've had 5 quarterbacks in less than 3 full seasons, 2 1/3 realistically. That's only 37 games. And we expect Davante Adams to be happy with that. And I'm cool. And I understand Raider Nation is all about the shield. They don't care. No players above the shield. I get it. I completely understand. In some respects, I agree. I'm also just going to say I don't blame Davante Adams for looking for a team that's competitive for how he's been treated. Now, I'm not saying that the new organization has treated Davante Adams badly. I think this is more of Davante Adams is just looking to be competitive, and he doesn't want to have a wasted season. And I wouldn't blame him. So anyways, that's all I'm going to say about that with the Davante Adams thing. I went on a really long rant on that, but I haven't really had a chance to talk to anybody about it. So I appreciate you guys listening. But we're going to look ahead right now. So obviously, as everyone knows, it's week 5. It's rivalry week. Wow, that's a tongue twister. We are playing our divisional opponents, the Denver Broncos. I believe this one is in Denver. Let me just pull this up real quick. But before I pull this up, I just want to give a quick reminder that in the last 4 seasons, we have swept the Broncos. And for my cousin Nick listening, I hope you've liked all 4 years that we've played you guys, because I have. So anyways, so yes, we're playing them in Denver. And I'm going to be completely honest. This game makes me nervous. The reason why is because it's not that I think that Bo Nix and Sean Payton's offense is going to run all over the Raiders or anything like that. I am nervous that the Raiders are going to be complacent in knowing that the last 4 seasons we have defeated them 8 consecutive times, and we're going for, in theory, another sweep. Eventually, records get broken, win streaks, get snapped, and I'm going to be honest. Maybe this is an upset waiting to happen for us because Denver Broncos don't look like a very productive offensive team. Bo Nix has had, I think, 1 good game, and the rest has been okay. Not a great game against New York. It was a rainy game, even though the Broncos came out and they won. But the previous games before that, they haven't looked the greatest. They look like an offense that's still figuring it out. Their defense is what I worry about with Patrick Surtain. We don't have Davante Adams, who is basically a neutralizer for Patrick Surtain. And that I'm worried about that because I know that Jacoby Myers is up to the challenge. I don't think that there's going to be a world where like we have no receptions and no yards. I'm sure that we will get some sort of productivity. But for the Raiders, like our run game is questionable. We had a good game against the Browns rushing, but Zamir White didn't really help in that factor. He had like 2 long rushes, but really it was Alex Madison that really had the long games that had the production. And so he's probably going to be the lead back. I hope we can continue that because our offensive line still needs a lot of work. Like in each 4 games that we've played, we're the team that gives up the most sacks amongst the team that we're playing. And yet we're the ones that have the better defense, so to speak. Granted, we didn't have Max Crosby during the Browns game, and hopefully we'll get him back this week. But point being is the reason why I wouldn't be surprised if maybe we should be on upset alert here for the Broncos is because they have nothing to lose. We have all the drama, we have all the pressure on us, and the last thing Raider Nation needs is to lose to our divisional opponent that we essentially have swept 4 years in a row, especially in the same season where we lost to a team in the Carolina Panthers that was touted as the worst team in the NFL because of the quarterback that they had. And then they make one change, and then now, they look like a better offensive team. And unfortunately, we were their first victory on, and it was a blowout nonetheless. So, if I'm the Raiders, of course, and I've said this a couple of weeks ago, we need to respect our opponents. Like, no matter what team we play, they're in the NFL. They're professionals. They are people that they are grown men that have bills, responsibility, pride. They're in the NFL for a reason. Whether some people agree with them or not, they are amongst the rest of us regular people. They are 1% the best athletes in the world that do what they do on an NFL level. So to just think that they are just going to roll over and play dead is naive. And this is why, I think the Raiders, if they can stick to an offensive game plan where they get into rhythm quickly, play calling is super important. Luke Getsy here, he hasn't done great play calling in the first 4 games. So this one, we're probably going to expect it's going to be rough. So we'll see how we develop, and especially our run game. If Alex Madison can get it going early to where he can penetrate the holes and he can find the lanes, break away, get a lot of tough yards to where it chips away at the interior of the Broncos, I think the Raiders have a chance, because now if Madison then gets into the interior and we're moving the line of scrimmage, then it gets into the play action. Then we can get Brock Bowers involved, who's extremely athletic, to where basically, even though we're going to lose Davante Adams, we still have Brock Bowers, which is like a number 1 receiver, even though he's at a tight end position. And so you have Jacoby Myers, who's a very serviceable receiver who has played the 1 on a previous team before and can certainly do it now. Now that Trey Tucker is kind of getting more involved with the offense and Gardner Minshew, maybe we have a chance to catch the Broncos sleeping. But our offensive line, as I mentioned, is a problem. Can they protect Gardner Minshew to where he can stay in rhythm? Gardner Minshew's going to have to be a little bit more cautious with protecting the ball just because the secondary will capitalize on their mistakes. Patrick Surtain, I imagine we're probably going to challenge him, but he will be somebody that will capitalize on our mistakes. And Gardner Minshew's already a quarterback that we have that is basically, we can expect at least one turnover from him, but we don't want a game where there's multiple turnovers, because just like what happened against the Chargers, we give the offense multiple opportunities and they turn the ball over, and now our defense is on the field too much. It's gonna get worn out, and we need to just play our game, control the line of scrimmage, also control the penalties. Our penalties the last 2 weeks have been outrageous. Granted, against the Browns, I think we committed 6 penalties before the first half. We didn't commit any the rest of the half. So hopefully that discipline issue has kind of been resolved a little bit, because one of the things that AP really cleaned up was the penalties that the Raiders constantly committed, which is funny to say because, it wasn't very long ago where the Raiders reset the penalty record from previously breaking their own and then previously breaking their own. They literally set the record, I think, 2 or 3 different times. So to hear that we have a coach that has gotten us to be more disciplined to where we are the least penalized team in the league, we need to use that to our advantage. So that way we don't set ourselves back. We don't create more opportunities for the Broncos to potentially get back in the game or take lead or whatever the case may be. So, I think the Broncos, they're working out a lot of kinks, and so are the Raiders. I think, again, I'm still pretty confident that the Raiders could come out with a victory just because of how the offense is and how our defense is. But I wouldn't sleep on the Broncos, and especially with having a surprise victory over the Jets, and their defense has been holding opponents to not very much scoring, and that secondary has been a problem for most opposing teams. Again, we don't have a great all-time quarterback that's going to be able to challenge that secondary. We got Gardner Minshew, who needs to get into rhythm, and he will have some errors, and we need to be able to combat that and be able to still remain competitive even against all that. So that's what I would say. I'm pretty confident in that. I think we'll still come out with a victory, but we cannot sleep on this team. I mean, yes, we've beaten them 4 consecutive years in a row, swept them each time. I think we've won the previous 8 matchups, but I don't want this to be the game where we snap that win streak. I want to keep it going. We need to grow it. And then, as I mentioned earlier, speaking of our divisional opponents, the Chiefs did play the Chargers. Chargers ultimately lost to the Chiefs. Chiefs did lose, though, Rashee Rice. So if you have a fantasy team that had Rashee Rice on it, as I did, I had him on a couple of different teams. My condolences to your fantasy football team, because if Rashee Rice by himself won you fantasy weeks as he did for me, I hear you. It's rough. I think a couple of things that you can look out for to replace him. I did write down a couple of players here for fantasy. There is a receiver in New York, Wendell Robinson, who plays for the New York Giants. I think he would be worthy of a pickup if you guys are interested in fantasy, just because, he had 18 targets alone with the Giants. And I think he is their number 2 guy. And a lot of defenses are pressuring Malik Neighbors, who rightfully so, man, he is a fantastic player, and it's having a lot of secondaries focus on him, and that's causing Robinson to open up the field. So I definitely think look to target for him. Rondell Robinson, like I mentioned. Jacoby Myers is another good one, as I mentioned. The Raiders are going to have to put a number 1 receiver in at that position. Myers would be the next guy up, so he's going to definitely get a lot of targets. Malik Shakur of the Bills is a good one. I have him stashed on my bench right now on another team, and quietly gets about 10 to 13 points, and he gets a lot of targets, and looks like he's a player that Josh Allen really, really trusts. So I would definitely look at him. If he is available on your waiver wire, I definitely think putting in a claim for this guy, Brian Thomas Jr. with the Jaguars, is definitely an option. He's had, I think 3 good games with Trevor Lawrence, even though the Jaguars aren't a great team. I think it's definitely worth a waiver wire pickup for him as well. So there's a couple of players that I would recommend for you guys to maybe think about adding to supplement that. But, I think the reason why I bring up Rashee Rice and not only talking about fantasy football is I think unfortunately, I think there's going to be a deal done probably before the trade deadline that the Chiefs do make for a receiver. I don't think that they're just going to completely roll out there with Sky Moore, Juju Smith-Schuster. Who else do they have on their? I know that they still have Travis Kelce and Noah Gray, but I think another receiver that has had his name out there. There's two in particular, but there's one I think that they'll probably going to go with. So Tyreek Hill and Amari Cooper. I think those are the two names outside of Davante Adams I've heard all week since Sunday or since they played their respective games, where maybe some players to be on the move. I don't know if Miami is willing to deal Tyreek Hill right now, just because really, like, if Tua does come back, maybe this team becomes more competitive, and obviously he'd be the best player on the field. And so why would you get rid of Tyreek, or why would you get rid of Tua's number one weapon that he can rely on to throw the ball to, turn and make plays and get a bunch of chunk yards? But of course, Tyreek Hill is very familiar with the Chiefs offense. Obviously, if they did make a move to get Tyreek, he'd be an easy plug and play type of player. I don't know if that's going to work though, because he is, I think, a little older, or not a little older. I just mean, like, I think he's getting to the point in receivers' ages where teams look at his age and they question if he's going to be able to maintain it for very much longer. And plus, he's also working on a huge contract, so I don't know if the Chiefs want to absorb that. But another player I think is probably going to get traded at least at some point before the deadline would be Amari Cooper. Earlier this week, Amari Cooper restructured his deal to where it's more of a team-friendly salary hit. I think it's like $1.2 million, I think, is the cap hit if a team were to trade for Amari Cooper. I think the Browns are preparing to let him go so that way they can get some assets. Probably can still get a second or a third round pick for him. And I think Amari Cooper is probably more likely to join the Chiefs for a trade. And if Amari Cooper joins that team, man, the Chiefs just bolstered their chance to get into, not only get into the playoffs, but, bolster their chance to have three-peat, because Amari Cooper is a supreme route runner. And, if people want to say, well, he's had such poor production in Cleveland, he did pretty well when he had Joe Flacco. Granted, with some injuries with Amari Cooper, he wasn't able to stay on the field a lot. And unfortunately, injuries do kind of cause Amari Cooper to lose some game or miss some games. But Amari Cooper, when he's been on the field with whatever the quarterback is, has done really well and still maintained a good set of production and looked really good last year. Still looks good this year. I think, again, Deshaun Watson, though, is just not the quarterback he used to be, and he doesn't play like it. Like, granted, each week maybe he gets slightly better, but Amari Cooper is good now, and he's, again, like I mentioned, a fantastic route runner, and it's kind of just like wasting talent. So for, Amari Cooper's name is probably going to be as valuable as Davante Adams out there. So the same teams that I had mentioned with with the Jets, which I don't think Amari Cooper is going to the Jets. I'm just making this for the argument. Jets could be on the play. Saints, if they're interested in adding a player, the Niners even, which I don't know if the Browns are going to want to deal with the Niners. They might. There is somewhat of a connection there with Shanahan, but you get the Niners, the Ravens might be in a play. The Steelers, again, almost the exact same teams that I had mentioned that would be in play to get Davante Adams are probably going to want to get a player like the Amari Cooper as well. Tyreek Hill, I'm sure the Dolphins are going to tell majority of the teams no on Tyreek Hill, but I bet if a team came with like an outrageous offer, they will probably let Tyreek go, because at the end of the day, you do have to think about your franchise's future. And I think with the recent injury with Tua, and the Dolphins are probably thinking of doing a rebuild, because your head coach didn't really set up this team for success outside of surrounding one player with all the weapons and structuring the playbook around this one player in Tua. And now that he's injured, the whole team is just crumbling. And I would assume that the Dolphins organization is looking at that. They're looking at Tyreek Hill's age and his contract. You got to pay Waddle a good amount eventually as well. And you're probably going to be in the market for a quarterback, whether you're signing one or you're going to draft one. And so you got to prepare for the future. And I think maybe this is as good a time as ever to strike while the iron is hot. Like, I don't know if Tyreek Hill's value is going to get any better than it is right now, because some teams might overpay for a player like Tyreek Hill, who still couldn't be the difference maker on a team. And Tyreek Hill's already expressed, as well as every other player, that he wants to win. So I don't know. I'm just saying that's probably an option. But I think Amari Cooper going to the Chiefs would be something that's pretty plausible, pretty reasonable, and I would not be surprised if that happened. And imagine if Amari Cooper and Andy Reid, Patrick Mahomes, they had a weapon like that. I mean, they're already a very good team with subpar weapons. I mean, they had great weapons to start the season with, and then obviously injuries have just decimated them. And so now they look way thinner. But you had Amari Cooper, what issues? Even with having Kareem Hunt and having I wouldn't even say a halfway decent running back rotation, you just add Amari Cooper in that offense and they're dangerous again. So, that's, I think, something that the Chiefs are going to look into doing, and I would be on the lookout for Amari Cooper going in the Chiefs for sure. And again, another player that I'll talk about briefly is Jaden Daniels. And the reason why I'm transitioning a little bit over to Jaden Daniels is because 2 weeks in a row now, he's had fantastic games against not only the Bengals, but he had another great one against, I'm losing my train of thought on who he had a great game against. And here I'm talking about the Cardinals. And I stretched the term good because it was actually a great game. And I've heard this stat, and I just want to repeat it on my show just to repeat it, which is he has more drives with scores, touchdowns, than he does in completions. And 82% completion percentage, absolutely crazy for a rookie. But again, though, I think the number was he had like over 50 plus or almost 60 starts in his college career. So he's kind of battle proof in a sense, to where, he's getting this down. I've heard a lot of analysts saying that he's probably the third best or maybe even the best NFC quarterback in the league right now. I think that's a bit of a stretch. He's having a really good 4 games, and the last 2 games have been phenomenal. I imagine he'll get better because Cliff Kingsbury has made this offense very, very adaptable to Jaden Daniels, and that it's like more of a college style playbook. And look, if you're going to be in get off my lawn kind of guy about that, it's working. So maybe the rest of the league should do it. Maybe they'd have better success with some of their quarterbacks coming in the league right now, because every year between the number 1 and number 2 pick, especially if they're quarterbacks, this happens where you have teams like, or fans like Bears fans, the Chicago Bears fans, who are questioning whether or not they should have gone with Jaden Daniels over Caleb Williams with how well Jaden Daniels is playing. Look no further than last season, where Bryce Young was taken number 1 and CJ Stroud was number 2. And look how that's playing. CJ Stroud probably is one of the top 3 or 4 MVPs of the NFL right now. And you have Bryce Young, who got benched in after the second week of the season. So, yeah, it happens almost every time that there is 2 quarterbacks taken. If I'm not mistaken, I think Jared Goff and Carson Wentz were in the same draft. Carson Wentz went number 2 and Jared Goff went number 1. For a while, it looked like that Carson Wentz going number 2 was the steal and Goff was the bust. And now you have Goff looking like, he was written off too soon, and Carson Wentz now looks like he's the bust, as he's backing up Patrick Mahomes right now on the Kansas City Chiefs, and he's bounced around to some different teams since then. So I just think that Jaden Daniels in this stretch has played really well. I think the Commanders are a sleeper of a team. I would say that, if I had to do a contenders or pretenders, I think that the Commanders are teetering closer to contender, especially out of the NFC the NFC East. Can't trust the Eagles, which is crazy because I have them at least getting the wild card or winning the division. Same thing with the Cowboys, but neither one of those teams are playing consistently or very well. You got the Commanders sitting at the top of the division, 3-1 right now, and they're absolutely putting up points, and defense isn't really holding people to a low deficit, but the defense is really doing their best to get off the field and give this offense some opportunities, and the offense is doing really well. And it helps when you got a quarterback throwing it thrown it to his team and it's being caught 82% of the time. That's extremely rare. Like that's crazy. So anyways, I just want to talk about Jaden Daniels for a little bit. And also too, like, I'm kind of sour that the Raiders weren't able to pull off the trade to get Jaden Daniels. I know that the Raiders did their best to leapfrog essentially the Commanders, and the Commanders stuck to their guns, so to speak, and was able to get Jaden Daniels. And man, if we would have been able to get Jaden Daniels, these Davante Adams issues wouldn't have happened. I just kind of wish now, thinking about it, that the Raiders would have had a better plan B than Gardner Minshew. So that way maybe we're set up better for the future. But hey, who knows? Maybe next season will be a lot better. I know there's a lot that's going to happen between now and then, so we will see. And I did mention the Eagles. They are a team that I would be really concerned with. I had them. I think I had them winning the division, and now they may not even get to the wild card. I mean, they play inconsistent. Now, granted, they are injured right now. They didn't have AJ Brown or Devonta Smith, so granted they are going through it. But their defense doesn't play very well. Nick Sirianni looks like that he does not have the same discipline over this team as he did when they went to the Super Bowl. I feel like that whole honeymoon phase of them winning and doing well is kind of over now. I mentioned this on our episode last week about coaches who are on the hot seat. I think Nick Sirianni is probably a coach that potentially might not even make it out of this season. I wouldn't be surprised if they continue to lose and he further loses the locker room, or, changes aren't made. I wouldn't be surprised if Nick Sirianni is let go at some point in the season. If the Eagles stay within contention, or at least within striking distance of the wild card, or, maybe even the NFC East title, maybe he'll stick around. But for the most part, I think that Nick Sirianni might be let go if they continue to underperform. And especially when you sign a guy like Saquon Barkley, you added a bunch of defensive pieces, and yet you still don't play up to the competition. I think it's a huge problem. So anyways, that's another one. But there's a bunch of teams that are 2-2, so they're on the cusp of either being below 500 or above 500. And I have these 8 teams. I think there's 8. Yeah, there's 8 teams that I put down here that I think once they win week 5, probably will be on the road to maybe putting a run together to where they are now coming into their own. They're developing into a team that is probably going to be a threat in their respective conference, maybe their respective division. In a couple of weeks, I'll be doing a contenders and pretenders. So these teams will probably be on those lists that I mentioned now. So, obviously mentioned the New York Jets and the Davante Adams rumors. They're 2-2 right now. I'm going to be completely honest. I think the Jets probably have a good opportunity to win this Sunday. They are going against the Vikings. It is in Minnesota. And the only reason why I say they might have a chance is because if their defense does give Sam Darnold some issues, they have a chance. And also, too, depending on how desperate the Jets are. How desperate the Jets are. If they're really looking to come out and really put their foot on the gas early when it comes to Minnesota and really throw the ball around, we'll see. But Minnesota Vikings, they are a really great team starting off 4-0. So it's, for them to have like a defensive lap at home against the Jets, probably be very difficult. But I think the Jets, if they don't win this game, probably is when we will see them pull the trigger on the Davante Adams trade. But I also don't know if I can take them seriously. I almost feel like if I had to do a contenders and pretenders today, they'd be for sure pretenders. So another team 2-2, the Ravens, who I mentioned also too, I think they are a team that's now starting to come into their form. And they are a team that, with a win that could happen against their divisional rival Bengals in Cincinnati, they could very easily now leapfrog to where they get that momentum and actually start building more confidence and really putting it on the league. However, I think Cincinnati at home is going to really want to get a win out of this one, because right now, as they sit 1-3, they've had some pretty good offensive outputs, but they just haven't been able to finish games. And last week, of course, getting their first victory was great, but probably the best that we've seen them in a minute was against the Commanders, who ultimately beat them late in the game. And so I imagine the Bengals are going to want to come out swinging as well. But I think the Ravens, they get this win, and it's really going to propel them into their confidence and, really change the course of their season as it started originally. But Cowboys, I think at 2-2, they really do need to get a win this upcoming week. I don't know if they will have the manpower to do it, just because with a bunch of injuries that they're going through, and they're playing it against the Steelers on Sunday Night Football, which is a huge one. Steelers are 3-1, tenacious defense. It's a tough battle for the Cowboys. I don't know if they come out with a victory on that one, and they could really sink their season. I think if they start off with 2-3, they're already having a lot of discourse internally, and I can't imagine them coming away from that. I almost want to say it. I don't know if Micah Parsons is going to re-sign with the Cowboys. I wouldn't be surprised if he's traded away in the offseason, just because, in my opinion, I think Micah Parsons has been speaking his mind, and that's fine. I don't know how much Jerry Jones likes that, and I don't know if that's going to stick around for very much longer. And also, too, don't know if the Cowboys have enough money to pay Micah Parsons. They just finished paying CeeDee Lamb. They just finished paying Dak Prescott. Don't know if Micah's going to get a contract, because if I'm not mistaken, some of the reason why they hesitated on paying Dak, one, was because of the $60 million per year price tag, but also, two, how are we going to pay Micah next season when he's due? And now that they paid Dak, on the 11th hour of the season, now how are we going to pay Micah? I think is another one. Maybe losing a bunch of players to salary cap to make it work. But then if that's the case, I see the Cowboys going back. Anyways, a lot of things that could take place for week 5 that could really set the course of the future for the Cowboys. Couple other teams here: Packers, Saints, Falcons, Niners. Falcons are actually playing against the Buccaneers right now as I'm recording. 7-7 right now, still in the first quarter, so it's still pretty early. But at least the Falcons, Saints, and the Packers. I think the Packers are probably the team that's going to come out with a victory that's really going to push them over the edge. I think now that they have Jordan Love back, and Matt LaFleur probably should be in conversations for Coach of the Year, just with how he's handled not having Jordan Love for the 2 weeks. They really did well against the Vikings when Jordan Love came back, and sure, they lost, but the fact that they were able to come back in the fourth quarter and get it that close, I think, that's a lot of that is talent and coaching. And I think coaching is a big part of why the Packers are doing as well as they are. And I definitely see the Packers getting a victory on Sunday and really propelling their season to where they're probably going to be challenging the Vikings and the Lions for, position in the NFC North. Who would have thought the NFC North now is looking very, very competitive? If the Bears can also put it together, argument could be that the NFC North is probably the second best division behind the AFC North, ironically. Falcons right now, they're probably the team in the South that is going to give the Buccaneers the best challenge. Saints, unfortunately, they're pretty close for me, putting them on fraud watch right now, just because first 2 weeks of the season, they did really well. And now they've kind of tapered off to where they've lost the last 2 games and their offense hasn't looked very well. So I think the Saints are a team to watch out for. If they don't get a win on Sunday against the defending Super Bowl champions, do they make a decision on how are they going to get Davante Adams as soon as possible? I think is a question. Niners, Niners, I think, are playing underwhelming because of all the injuries. But if they don't win, which they're playing their divisional rival, the Cardinals, at home, so they have a very good chance to win. However, if they don't win and they drop to 3-2, what are the chances that they even get into the wild card or win the division or whatnot? I again, as I said earlier this season, before the whole season started, which is, I think what makes it difficult is they go through this injury bug, they underperform, and that's what we're seeing right now. And it doesn't help that Brandon Ayuk, who they obviously signed in the offseason, who held out, has not come into form. And so, some of these injuries that you would hope that they could get over, it's not happening because they just don't have that production there. And, you look at other teams like Seattle, who's very competitive. They lost a late game, or the Niners lost a late game lead to the Rams. Cardinals are a tough out. I mean, I don't think they're a playoff team quite yet, but they'll give you a run for your money, especially if your defense isn't on point. And again, the Niners kind of need this win to kind of just get them more confidence and get them going in the right track, because if they fall to 2-3 and they keep battling over, being under 500, being over 500 and not kind of get over that 500 hump and then continue to build on that, it would probably propel their season to where they just continue to underachieve. And who knows what other injuries are coming down the pike, because I don't think that we've seen the last of the Niners' woes, so to speak. I mean, I know that they're praying to get healthy, but Christian McCaffrey coming back anytime soon doesn't sound like it. Deebo Samuel, he got back from a injury pretty quickly, so that's good. Brandon Ayuk, is he going to turn into Brandon Ayuk, who they paid him for? Who knows? George Kittle looked good, so we'll see how this Niners team shakes out. I think they almost as much as anybody need that victory to get over 500 just for the confidence based stuff. 100%, they need to really address that. So, all right. So I'm going to go over my top 7 power rankings from the NFL week 4. So this is not week 5. I know right now week 5 has already started. As I mentioned, Thursday Night Football is playing. I have no idea what the results will be following this episode. So if it's different following tonight because of record changes, I'm not responsible for that. So number 1, the Kansas City Chiefs, 4-0, number 1 in the power rankings, defending champions. Yes, they lost their number 1 receiver. And are they going to be number 1 next week? I don't know. If they lose to the Saints, maybe. But for now, they're the Super Bowl champions. In my book, they're the number 1 team right now, just because defense is giving them opportunities. They seem to find a way to win when it matters. Help of the receiver, help of the officials or not, the Chiefs are number 1 right now. They're number 1 on my power rankings. Number 2, Minnesota Vikings, 4-0 in dominant fashion nonetheless. I mean, their biggest scare came against the Green Bay Packers, the divisional rivals. So you got to figure that they would have given them, the biggest run of their money. Brian Flores has really transformed that defense. Kevin O'Connell, another coach, probably leading candidate right now for coach of the year, just because of what he's been able to do with Sam Darnold and really navigating that team. And to be truthful, every season Kevin O'Connell has been at Minnesota, they've been extremely competitive. Quarterback play has been done well, and that offense has remained competitive, and Kevin O'Connell deserves his due on that one. Number 3, Houston Texans at 3-1. They got back on the winning track this past Sunday. Were they down for a majority of that game? They were. They persevered, came back, and again, looking like the number 1 offense in the NFL. CJ Stroud looked really well. I imagine that they had that bad taste in the mouth from Minnesota beating up on him, and they're going to want to continue to get on this win streak. So, I mean, I look to them to continue, but right now they are the 3rd best team in my opinion. Buccaneers, who are currently playing, I have them at number 4, and they're currently leading right now. The Falcons at 10, and they're up 10 right now. Anyways, I have them at number 4. You beat very competitive teams in your conference and also other teams, you're going to end up on this list. And the way that they're moving the ball, Baker Mayfield has looked really, really good. Mike Evans had some pretty good games to start the season, but Chris Godwin seems to be the guy that has the best connection with Baker. But for the most part, this team with Todd Bowles and the rest of the crew, they are looking really, really good. So I've got the Buccaneers at 4. Detroit Lions at number 5. I just couldn't justify putting the Lions above the Buccaneers, who the Buccaneers did beat the Lions to give the Lions their only loss of the season. So it's really hard for me to put them above that. But they really showed great teamwork against Seattle. Kind of got into a little bit of a shootout, and their defense didn't really hold Seattle to a lot of points, but they had a comfortable enough lead to where they were able to kind of handle Seattle in the way that they wanted to, regardless. Jared Goff went 18 for 18 in that game. Are you kidding me? This team is firing on all cylinders. I wouldn't be surprised if a couple of games go certain ways that the Lions are probably knocking on the back door of number 2 or maybe even being number 1. So we'll see after this week's games how that all shakes out. Number 6, the Buffalo Bills. They did not have a great game against the Ravens. Pretty much got handed their their asses, so to speak. And, I think what was tough is I think it was just before halftime, maybe it was slightly after halftime. They were starting to build momentum to come back. And there was a play that kind of got messed up that caused, I think, a fumble, or it was the play that I think it was like a jet sweep that was given back to Josh Allen, and he was then supposed to throw it, but he ended up getting like absolutely obliterated. And I can't remember if it turned into a fumble. I think it did turn into a fumble, and it changed the momentum that the Bills were getting, and it put it right back on the Ravens, and the Ravens never let up. And of course, the Bills didn't have an answer for King Derek Henry. He absolutely ran all over them, had 200 plus yards and all-purpose yardage with passing and receiving and with rushing. And, the Bills defense just couldn't keep up with the Ravens. And I think, the Bills, I think, are a better team than what the Ravens did. I just think the Ravens were that much stronger than the Bills. And maybe that's an argument to why, maybe that's just an argument to why, they need to be, on this list or whatnot. So anyways, this one was a tough one. So, I'm sure I'm going to get some flack with what team did not get into this top 7, but it's my top 7. And if you have a top 7, I encourage you to put it in the comments. Let me know what you guys are thinking with your top 7 and why you have it positioned. But I have the Commanders at number 7. And look, am I a prisoner of the moment? Sure, I am. Jaden Daniels, who, again, as I mentioned earlier in the show, 82% completion percentage. Him and Terry McLaurin looks like that they've got that connection working. The run game is looking really, really well. Again, Cliff Kingsbury has this offense looking very good. Dan Quinn, former Falcons head coach who took them to the playoffs multiple times and led them to the Super Bowl, even though they lost. And I also want to caveat a little bit with the help of Kyle Shanahan as offensive coordinator. So that was just a sidebar. Regardless, though, the Commanders looked really, really well. They've had great wins against the Bengals. And again, they just had a crazy win against against the Cardinals. Their season is going to determine, of course, as they get through divisional opponents, how they fare offensively against tougher defenses. Because, you got to play teams like the Lions, you got the Eagles that they got to play, the Cowboys. If they can continue to get this momentum, I don't know the ceiling for the Commanders, but they might be, and I said this on an Instagram, I commented this on an Instagram page, but Commanders, crazy enough, in this NFC East division, look like the most stable team at the moment. And that's saying a lot because we know what the Commanders have been through and what they were. And for us to say that they're the most stable team with teams like the New York Giants, with teams like Philadelphia Eagles and Dallas Cowboys, they're the most stable of them as of today. And that's wild. That's why I got them number 7. Fill in who you would put number 7 instead. But right now, I'm going to go with recency bias, and I'm going to go with the Commanders. So again, my top 7 power rankings are Kansas City Chiefs, Minnesota Vikings at number 2, number 3, Houston Texans, Tampa Bay Buccaneers, number 4, Detroit Lions, number 5, number 6, the Buffalo Bills, and the Commanders at number 7. Let me know down below what you guys think and what your power rankings would be. You can give me top 3, top 5, top 10, top 12. Doesn't matter. I like doing top 7 just because it's a little bit tougher to come up with like a top 7 power ranking than it is a top 10. I think everyone does a lot of top 10s. Top 7 or those obscure numbers are kind of fun to deal with. So anyways, guys, that is it for me. Thank you guys so much for listening to my NFL rants and the topics. If there's any topic that you guys like, let me know down below. Let me know too in the comments what you guys are thinking regarding the teams. Raider Nation, let me know how you're feeling about the Davante Adams situation, and also to, how do we beat the Denver Broncos this Sunday? Let me know down below. I really appreciate you guys for listening. Please go and subscribe to the podcast on YouTube. Subscribe to it now while you're watching. Subscribe to us on, Apple, Google, Spotify, iHeart, as I had mentioned. Go check out the channel over there. And also to check us out on social media, Facebook, TikTok, Twitter, Threads, Instagram, I think I already said, and Facebook. All those social media platforms, go follow us over there. Pretty active on those, and I try to post on those pretty regularly, and I love to interact with you guys. So I would really, really love to hear from y'all. Drew sends his love. He did do a Stingers Up podcast earlier this week. If you have not listened to that, it's on the YouTube page right now, or you guys can go listen to it wherever you get your podcast as well. So go listen to Stingers Up. He had some great things to talk about the Sanger West Hornets that had a game against Hoover, and also the boys basketball. And he's also previewing too that there is another game coming up. So definitely go check out that. He sends his best. He sends his love. Of course, he couldn't join me. He is really busy with stuff right now. However, he will have more content for you guys coming out, especially content coming from his car. He's got a Giants video that he just made, and we're going to put that out pretty soon since the Giants just let go of Farhan Zaidi and hired Buster Posey to be president of baseball operations for the Giants. We're all excited about that, and he definitely was. So you guys will definitely see a video about that coming up very, very soon. But for me, that's it. I appreciate it. Thank you guys so much for listening. Please be kind to one another. Thank you for listening, and I will see you guys on the next episode. So I'll see